All right, and we're live. Well, hey, friends, welcome back to Mental Notes with Matt, the podcast where we explore what it means to live honestly, feel fully, and show up for our lives in a real way. My guest today is someone that has been an inspiration for me for, it's been 2 decades plus now. Ray McAnally is an actor, a writer, and a storyteller, and a guy I once had the privilege of appearing in a few of his short sketch videos back in the day. But in the years since, I've really had the pleasure of watching Ray evolve into something that's much bigger than a performer. He's a seeker, a connector, a traveler, a deeply empathetic human being with a real gift for helping others see the world and themselves more clearly. Just a few things that I picked up on social media. Ray, you said, "Hey, I'm Raymond, and I share photos from my real travels to inspire others to go see and do." And in another post, he adds, "If you like to travel, love history, and see how it all makes you a more understanding and empathetic human being, then hit the follow button." Well, I definitely did. And that's what we're exploring today, how movement, curiosity, and presence in the world can make us softer, stronger, and more connected to the human experience. So thank you again, Ray, for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time to have an open, vulnerable conversation with me.
Thanks for asking. I'm always up for that, and it's so awesome to see you. Sorry, it's been so long and such a distance. I was telling my wife, Whitney, that if we hadn't moved away from New York, I think we would have made 100 sketches by now.
100%. But that's life, right? We all, as we get older, kind of move in different directions. It's difficult to keep up with all those threads of our past lives,
Yes.
but I'm grateful that you're here and it's great to see your face. So why don't we'll dive right in. You said that travel helps make you a more understanding and empathetic human being, and I completely agree. Can you talk about maybe a moment or a trip that really changed the way that you see people or even yourself?
Yeah. I grew up admiring trips and travel. So my dad was a small town kid from Savannah, Tennessee, which nobody has ever heard of. Maybe now, every now and then it pops up on people's radar because it's part of the catfish capital of the United States. And here he was, this small town kid, went to the Army, but was an animal husbandry expert in college. And then ended up traveling, had an office in Perth, Scotland, traveled the world doing that. So by the time I came along, he was in his mid-30s. My mom was in her mid-30s. They got married late, quote unquote, according to the South. And they just had this love for life, love for seeing things, love for seeing places that they absolutely instilled in me. And so as a family, we had a family business, agricultural business, and we were always traveling. So that impulse to travel definitely came from my parents. But it wasn't until I would say I was the summer before my high school year, and I went on a trip to South Dakota to help repair a women's shelter on one of the reservations that had been damaged by a storm, I believe. And so we all jumped in, a whole bunch of us who were in Scouts together and went to church together. We all jumped in to go on this trip, and it was absolutely transformative for me. It was the first time I had traveled to a place that was very different from home that I connected to instantly. I remember writing in my journal that I was having 6 or 7 deja vus a day. And that actually started a whole series in my life of moments that were deja vu moments. But that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, this trip to South Dakota, here I was just completely taking in a culture on its surface different from my own. But what I was learning was I was just meeting other people who didn't grow up where I grew up, but were growing up in ways that made sense to me, that I could connect to. In some ways that were things that I'd only read about in books or seen in movies, but the humanity of it all I could absolutely relate to. And it also helped me, I don't know if it was instinct or something an adult told me or a mixture of things, but that's when I started to realize that when I traveled, I wanted to not make judgments. I wanted to take in wherever I was, meet it wherever it is. It's almost like moment-to-moment work as an actor.
Yeah.
I'm not going to superimpose a decision on this place. I'm going to see where it is.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I feel like that's a mindset that most people don't really develop until they're much older in life. How old were you during this trip to South Dakota?
I don't have kids, so I can never, the joke in the family is that every childhood story, I'm either 2, 5, or 10. But I was going into high school, so it must have been I was 14.
Yeah.
And I know that for a
Yeah,
fact
I mean, so,
because
yeah.
I was already wood carving. And so this necklace that I wear to this day and always have on me it's like a personal, just spiritual totem. But I made it not in connection to that trip, but I had it on that trip. So I was 14.
That's amazing. I mean, 14, such a formative time in people's lives. And I know personally, I was very fortunate growing up. I had parents that wanted us to have experiences and travel. I remember we did a cross-country road trip from New Jersey to California, and I didn't appreciate it. I took it all for granted, and so I didn't have that initial experience. And I wish I could go back and really have that kind of perspective going to these places and being fully open. I don't think I learned that until a little bit later. I think that's true for a lot of people, but it's amazing that you had that much of a meaningful experience at such a young age, and it seems like it has kept you open to other people's experiences.
Well, and not
it's
to build
also
myself
noteworthy.
up by any
Yeah.
means, because I definitely ignored what was outside the window for years on road trips with my parents. That might have been,
Sure.
this one might have been so transformative to some degree because of how much I actually tuned in finally.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing that you could recognize that. And it's also interesting you grew up in Tennessee and South Dakota. I mean, it's not next door, but it's not another country. And the differences in culture and community are really that different, everywhere you go, if it's not your immediate kind of community. So along with your love for travel, you have this love for history, and that comes through in your content too. So how has learning the stories of the past helped you to understand the present better, especially when it comes to human behavior and emotional growth?
Yeah, I think in order to study history, I kind of have to put myself there, and visiting places that have historic context. I mean, every place has some sort of historic context, but we don't feature it. But visiting a place that is historically featured helps me retain it. I'm a kinesthetic learner. So I'm one of those
Same.
people, if I drive somewhere once, I'll always remember how to get there. And the same thing happens when I visit historic sites, is I retain that feeling, that information, all that sense memory, everything, especially if I steep myself in the context of the history that I'm trying to learn. And so I just find it very, very powerful. Actually, hats off to the Park Service for a lot of the work their historians do. I was on a tour in Little Rock, at the Little Rock High School where the Little Rock Nine took place. And there was this young historian. She was earning her master's degree and working for the Park Service. And I got lucky that she was my tour guide, because she took us through the experience of that little girl who was walking down that street all by herself, why she was dropped off by herself, why her adults in her life felt like this was okay to do. All these things leading up to the moments where she's being spit on by adults, just trying to desegregate this school. I mean, a 9-year-old doesn't know. I think that was her age. Doesn't know. She just knows that that's a school she's supposed to go to. And the way it was a performance, the way this historian acted out that moment. And I think if we can get to that level of understanding humanity and the choices of history through human behavior, I think it can be incredibly powerful. And that's when we start to reshape how we deal with our own futures as students of history.
Yeah, and I guess connect with other people. It seems that there's a lot of resistance, especially in modern society, recognizing history or recognizing facts in general.
I think you can rewrite history when you do take out the humanity. It's interesting because I think a lot of, especially tragic moments in history, are taught to us emotionless. And here are the facts. Here's how many people died. Here's this, here's that. And I think we would retain it better and might not repeat those patterns if we actually got into the weeds of firsthand accounts and what it felt like to be there.
And this is why the arts are so important and so powerful, and why I've always, as a really deep feeler, been drawn to watching stories unfold. And I think as I've gotten older, I recognize that I have always been an avid, passionate film buff, self-proclaimed. But the older I get, the more I'm interested and curious about individuals in the real world and their experiences. And I've been fortunate to travel around the globe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that travel, at the end of the day, is probably one of the most important things that anybody can do. Immerse yourself into a culture, into an environment that makes you uncomfortable,
Yes.
and you've got no way out. You learn the most about yourself and everyone else when you're in those situations. I mean, I lived in Hong Kong for 2 years, and the first few days I was there, the first trip, I felt obviously completely out of my element, but learned a lot about myself in that experience. So powerful.
Yeah,
traveling.
and it is amazing to me how many people don't, experiences in life, we know as actors are relative. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people, and I think sometimes, sad to say, our most arrogant fellow humans are the ones who don't put themselves in those uncomfortable situations. And they don't, quote unquote, walk a mile in someone else's shoes, because what you learn, especially language, is an amazing equalizer and can change your status really, really quick, right? I have been in situations where I had no business being in the little tiny village or town I was in because I could not communicate in language with anyone. But it worked out. And I'm grateful for those experiences because it's made me a better person in general. But I always joke these days, especially living in Los Angeles and traveling a lot, I am not smart enough to speak multiple languages. My brain just does not work that way. And so I'm in awe of people who can switch back and forth. And one of the things that drives me nuts is when somebody says, speak whatever language is dominant here. Speak English, speak this. Are you kidding me?
I mean, I feel like most of those people haven't been out of their own country.
No, they haven't.
And I don't think that,
anybody who says that, you can automatically assume doesn't speak multiple languages and hasn't really ever tried.
And all of my experiences of being in non-English speaking countries, I mean, maybe they were saying it I didn't understand, but no one's ever said to me, "Come on, you need to speak my language." There's always been a lot more openness.
You've never been to France?
I've been for only for a couple days, and
the French will tell you
it's kind of a blur
that your French is horrible and you need to get better at it. Yeah,
that just reminded me of the Dumb and Dumber quote. I don't know, Lloyd. The French are assholes.
I love France. I love being
all
there.
My French friends, of course. Yes, exactly.
But holy cow,
I love the French.
They're brutally honest about how bad you're butchering their language, or the fact you're not even trying.
Yeah. But it's amazing, and I love what you said. You said, it works out. It worked out. I think that a lot of people hesitate or completely resist against going outside of their town, their state, their country, because it's just so unpredictable in their own minds. Anything could happen. And I think there's also an inflated idea of, how different things are going to be when you go to a place you haven't been before. But what I'm trying to get at is that every place I've been to, regardless of how different it is, you're surrounded by other human beings that are made up of the same exact stuff, have the same fears and emotions, just different life experiences. So it's just incredible. I wish more people would push themselves to travel. I really do think it's one of the most important things you can do.
Absolutely. I always think of how many people, when I first started traveling on my own, I was coming out of college and I got an internship at a theater in another state, and the adults around me who didn't know me well enough, my mom wasn't worried at all. They were worried. They said, "Do you know how to deal with this kind of city?" I was like, I mean, I guess it's a city. I've been in cities and I'll figure it out. And it was because they had never done that themselves. And I value now, especially 10 plus years in New York or in that area, and then I also grew up working on farms. I've been lucky to have that mix of rural and city, and I'm just as comfortable hopping on the train in Manhattan or abroad in another subway system as I am honestly being thrown a bucket and having to milk a cow.
Right.
That's so I think
Jack of all trades.
Yeah, I thank all the adults in my life for giving me those experiences, because I wasn't a kid who grew up on a farm. I grew up working on other people's farms, and I grew up in a subdivision. So I had that experience too. And so I've always been a bit of a, not quite fully immersed in whatever place. The whole time I was in New York, man, I was listening to bluegrass and jam bands and stuff that juxtaposed the city. I was never going to be a New Yorker, just like I'm never going to be the farm kid because I grew up in suburbs, So it's kind of always been my place in life.
Keeping a nice balance of all of it.
Yeah.
There's also this version of travel that is about escape, going on vacation and kind of numbing out, but your approach seems more about engagement. I mean, from what I see on the stuff that you're posting, what's your mindset when you travel? Are there specific rituals or intentions that you bring with you to stay present and grounded when you're going, or is it automatic at this point?
Yeah, so Well, for me, the automatic part is I plan trips, not vacations. And so being married now, that's one of the things that we talk about as we're planning any trip or any time away is this a trip or a vacation? And can we fit a vacation inside this trip? So the distinction being a trip is seeing as much as you can possibly see, immersing yourself in the culture, seeing historic sites, all that kind of stuff. That's what I think of. The minute I'm going to spend money on getting somewhere new, that's what I want to do. My wife, luckily, it's not a strain on our marriage because she loves that stuff too, but she also has taught me the value of a vacation and truly doing nothing, having no plans whatsoever. So thanks to her, I've experienced that a couple of times, and I do like it. I can't do it for very long.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. I have a hard time sitting still. It's just the curiosity of things and just, anxiety. But I have loved over the years going on solo trips. They've been some of my favorite vacations or, solo adventures. I just really appreciate being in a place where I have to figure it out on my own. But I have never really been one to do a whole lot of planning. I'll have a couple ideas of what I might want to do, but I get there and it's like, all right, let's see what's going on. Let's just wander around. And it's worked and it's not worked and lots of different situations. But I think that everything kind of comes down to balance. It's good to have some stuff set up, but it's also good to just kind of relax and go with the flow. For sure.
When I'm by myself, when it's just a me trip, I'll have a list of things that are along the way, and I'll hit as much or as little of it as I have time to do. If I roll into a place and I'm like, this is it, this is where I want to be today, I figure it out and I stay for as long as I want. Then much to the people who loves me chagrin, I oftentimes won't know where I'm staying that night. I still do that. When I started traveling abroad, I started solo backpacking in college and grad school and after. And I always knew I would book my first night's stay when I got off the plane, and I would book my last night before I had to get back on my flight. And the rest, I had no idea.
That's amazing.
I would read the guidebook on the plane.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting not to know what's going to happen next.
It really is.
That's
and then,
cool.
that opens you up to keeping your ear out. You meet people at the hostels and you meet fellow travelers and they tell you about something awesome that they saw, or they invite you with them for dinner and you just say yes and until you have the adventure you want to have.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can't tell you how many experiences I've had where that's been how things have played out. And it keeps me coming back to the thing that you said. It works out. You know what I mean? Like it has to. If it doesn't work out, you're no longer here.
Yeah, but I certainly don't take for granted. I've had some really good conversations with women who solo travel, and that's a whole different level,
for sure,
of concerns. Because I'm lucky to be, 6 foot, big dude. I can be intimidating if I need to be. All that stuff, and it's gotten me out of some jams for sure. But yeah, no, there's a version of this for everybody,
For sure. I was going to bring that up, for people that can't travel far or often or have hesitation because, they feel like they're a little bit more vulnerable than other people might be. What are some ways that we can cultivate that same kind of curiosity and empathy in everyday life and exploring, and getting out?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have people, I think early on, especially in Raymond's Way, I would mention places I was visiting, lesser known national parks or national sites, and people would chime in and say, well, I'm in a wheelchair, I can't do that, or I have some sort of disability. And what they didn't know is I have a spinal fusion. I've had to modify so much in my life. My spine was fused at 20, and it's been a lot of lessons learned. I always have to make considerations for what I can and can't do. I don't consider myself a high adventure kind of outdoors person, but that might be why. I don't know what I might have gotten into had I not grown up in so much back pain.
Yeah.
But I still got out there,
no joke.
And I did it. And every time, especially national parks and places like that, there's wonderful accommodations. And I would hate to see anybody. I know there's a sliding scale of issues that would cause someone not to leave their house, but you don't have to go very far to have an adventure, to have a change of mindset. It's like listening to a good song. It can change your day. And if you find yourself having a dark cloud, if you find yourself having a one-note perspective on the world, then it's probably time to get out and listen to a different song and see something different. And you don't have to go very far. You really don't. If all you can afford is 2 gallons of gas, then pick a place that's maybe will cost you a quarter of a gallon to get to. I don't know. Don't max out don't run the risk of going empty, but you don't have to go far.
Yeah. Rent a bike. So important to flip the script when you feel stuck or stagnant or feel like that you're stuck, you know? I mean, what's the most soul-stirring place that you've ever visited? Like you got there and just blown away unexpectedly.
There's been a few. South Dakota that I talked about earlier is definitely a big one for me personally.
I need to visit there. I've never been.
It really is. I mean, it's a place to me that just sings. Just there's a hum to it that I connect to. I don't know how or why. That is not my culture or heritage. I'm Tennessee, 7 generations back on both sides. But I will say a place that I always connect to just as heavily is Ireland. And I've been, I guess, about 5 times now. And that is my family heritage on both sides. And it's not I want this to be a place I connect to. It is a instant, I know this place. I feel this place. This feels like home. It speaks to me in a way that the place I grew up speaks to me, and I don't know what that is, you know? And I get the sense of humor, and I get the pain, and I get the laughter, and it's just amazing to connect to places that you shouldn't connect to on the level that you do.
Yeah.
And I would want that experience for everybody, especially if they've traveled and never had that. There are those curmudgeons in the world who, like, you know, I see it when I travel. They're traveling, they're in a beautiful new place, and all they can talk about is how it doesn't have this, and this from home.
Right. Yes. Oh, yeah.
And
Absolutely.
that is something as actors we can relate to. That's somebody who's not letting the circumstance in. You're not here right now. What's going on with you? I don't get it, and maybe I'm lucky to not have that.
Well, I mean, it's about comfort. It's about what you know. And when you get out of that comfort zone and you're in a place where you're forced to try something outside of what you're used to, that's a little bit scary, too.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a lot of people that are more small-minded and won't kind of leave their own circle, I almost feel like they're afraid of what they might learn that would change their perspective, which would then turn their entire world upside down. And I think in a lot of cases, it could be that a lot of people that are more small-minded stick with that because they get to stay with their own group, so to speak. I don't know if I'm explaining that in the right way, but do you know what I mean?
I do. And the terms I would use is it always feels like fear. You know, what was that movie? It's going to be hilarious referencing this. So the remake of Shaft.
Oh my God.
With Samuel L. Jackson.
I don't think I've even seen the first Shaft, but I'll put it on my list.
You haven't? You need to see the first Shaft.
No.
So the remake of Shaft, it's Samuel L. Jackson's playing Shaft.
Yeah.
And Jeffrey Wright is playing the bad guy. And he makes this incredible observation about the fact, like, he is a drug kingpin, but only in a 10-block radius. If he steps outside that 10-block radius, he's nobody and could die like that. Yeah. And I feel that way about people who, like you're saying, the small-mindedness has nothing to do with your intellect or mental capacity. It has to do with the world you surround yourself with, I think. And if the world you surround yourself with is so tiny because you need it to be that insular because you're afraid of everything outside of that bubble, then what is that character's name? It's like Peoples. I think his name is Peoples, which is hilariously ironic in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But you are that that prisoner of your own world in a way. If you can't leave it and still be yourself, then what are you really?
Yeah, and it's become increasingly more difficult for, I think, everyone to allow themselves to get a 360 perspective on everything because there's so much noise now. And even if you are on the side of things that feel right and honest and just, there is still a large segment that is not being 100% honest, you know, and that can drown out the balance and the nuance of both things. And I think that that's a big struggle right now, you know?
Yeah, there's a lot of demonstrative behavior. There's a lot of emulation happening. And it's interesting because people I know really closely, those are really the social media accounts I follow. I don't really follow a lot of strangers unless it's like a resource kind of site But the people I know sometimes, and I know them as human beings, and I know that they're putting things out in the world that they think might make a difference. It's their little form of protest or whatnot. But they'll be accused by strangers who don't know them of virtue signaling or putting something out there just to be seen. That's fascinating. I do think that's a lens moment. I think that's a mirror reflection. I think if you've never put anything out in the world because that's genuinely you, because you don't know yourself, you're going to assume everybody else is doing that too.
I 100% agree. I 100% agree. And I've had that kind of self-doubt creep in even working on this project. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because 6 months ago, this wasn't even a thought in my mind yet. But when I started to design it and put it together, it's like, are people going to think that I'm just performing, especially with my background?
Yeah.
I think it just makes it a little bit easier for me to come there with maybe slightly better communication skills. But the passion to understand is really there. And it's not to garner millions of followers, although, hey, I'd welcome that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Or to get paid to do what you love, which is why we pursued acting.
Well, exactly. Absolutely. It's deeper than that. And I've loved over the years seeing your evolution also, because, not to say that you weren't producing content that was deeper and more relevant, but it seems like it's more pointed now than maybe 15 years ago.
You don't think the Bare Naked Chef had a message for the ages?
Well, this is the perfect segue to please plug Daily Fiber Films, which remains, very, very close in quality to SNL's entire 50 years, in my humble opinion.
Thank you. It was so much fun, and I miss those days. I miss that ensemble. I think that whole thing came out of that impulse of what I love about theater, which is the ensemble makes the piece.
Yeah.
So that was fun. Yeah, if anybody wants to go on a rabbit hole, just look up Daily Fiber Films on YouTube, or I'm sure it'll come up in other places. But yeah,
please do. Yeah, and I think, I don't know about you, but comedy, that's been a major through line in my life. Mm-hmm. As a child, as a teenager, as an adult. That's never gone away. And I mean, you're hilarious. I mean, that's a way, I think, to cut the tension also, and to say something in a way that also kind of promotes vulnerability in other people.
Yeah, comedy is disarming.
That's how I've always approached it. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's disarming, and it can get a message across so effectively. I mean, there's a reason why, this is going to sound antiquated, but the old water cooler mentality, what did you watch over the weekend? There's a reason why it's usually comedy bits that people are doing. And comedians now have, they have more political sway than most politicians, And there's a reason for that. I always think of, what is that? I think it holds up that it's true that every Shakespearean drama starts with a comedic moment, and every comedy starts with a dramatic moment. All the comedies usually start with somebody being put to death.
Yeah.
But he understood the need for juxtaposition, in that way.
Yes. It's not just one-dimensional, and that's true of life also. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, what else is going on right now with you? So you have the Raymond's Wear. What else is going on in your life?
Yeah, so Raymond's Wear is a travel project, but more, I guess, an empathy project. I'm kind of more interested as a person, as an artist, in empathetic storytelling, and trying, because I see so much failure in the messaging that we're putting out to combat dehumanization in our culture. I think dehumanization is a big problem for us, and there's all sorts of labels and names I can put on it, but that's basically the crux of it. We're not treating people like people, and especially here in the United States, we're too wealthy. We have too much potential for everybody to be okay. It just drives me nuts. We could have it all, folks, if we would just treat the stranger like we would a family member. Now, I understand.
It's hard to understand.
I've got some family members that I don't treat well, but you know what I'm saying.
Of course.
And so I'm interested in projects that do this. So Raymond's Wear came out of the fact that I was traveling and I love talking about it. And I am that person who I will get a random text message at 10 o'clock at night. Hey, we're going on a trip to San Francisco. Do you have any recommendations? And an hour later, they've got an email with a laundry list of things.
A spreadsheet.
Yeah. And an order to see it in if you're up for that, whatever you want to make of it. And I've been doing that for years. and been lucky to travel a lot for work as an actor. And then I will just turn things into a road trip. And so I realized I had all this content. I probably should have I had a bunch of friends trying to get me to do this in the pandemic. And in the pandemic, I just needed to relax. Like I needed to back off of creating things. So I missed my window for that kind of mega stardom, I guess. I have no idea. But it's so much fun to do. And it's what I'm passionate about talking about anyway. So why not turn that into a pursuit? Otherwise, auditioning, still, I feel like I'm auditioning better than ever in my life. And so do my reps. They're super happy. And, some things go my way and a lot of things don't. It's an interesting time in this industry.
For sure, yeah.
And then writing constantly. I write a lot of content for work that I do, a nonprofit work that I do. But I also, of course, still write creatively to get it out into the world.
Absolutely. You got to keep on scratching that itch.
Mm-hmm.
And back during the pandemic, you kind of relax, but it's more like you're hitting the reset button. Come back with a vengeance, and things have I've always loved the idea that, things might not end up being what you imagined them to be when we were younger. But there's a through line. The things that we're passionate about, the things that you're passionate about, they're going to, their head's going to pop up along the way.
Well, and I also think there's so much about what we're raised with that's a myth in terms of nobody's intentionally hiding the changes in life from you. I think they're too busy living them.
Right.
And it always reminds me of that story about all the American acting teachers have been reading about this amazing guy, Stanislavski, and then they finally get on the legendary plane flight and go over to Russia to meet Stanislavski. And they're like, we've studied your work. We're here to study with you. And he was like, oh yeah, I don't approach it that way at all anymore.
I remember reading that. Which book was that?
I think they all talk about it. And, Uta Hagen and Sanford Meisner and all of them, Stella Adler, they all had that moment of like, are you kidding me? And so they came back, and then the various acting schools were started. But I've always loved that story because it's very human, right? Like, I think we're given a lot of advice about the way the world works out of lessons that people wish they had known when they were at our age. What they're not telling us is the lesson they're learning right now. So as an artist who's hit my mid-40s, I am thinking back on friends I've made who were where I am now when I was in my 20s, and realizing, oh, that's what you were going through. And that was the life change you made. I remember when I first started out as an actor, I really had I guess you couldn't hack it, response to anyone who left the industry. I understand it's a tough industry. I guess you couldn't hack it. And then there was arrogance to it, I'm sure. And the older I've gotten, I don't think it took too terribly long, but the older I've gotten, the more I've been like, good for you. Oh my gosh. Go pursue something that's going to make you happy. That's all that matters.
At the end of the day, that's the most important thing. And that's what I'm rediscovering now, because I this creativity that I am feeling so much more of now has been dormant for a long time. I mean, from lots of negative life experiences, but you just can't let it shape you. You need to use that stuff to fuel you to do the things that actually bring you authentic joy.
Yeah, because that's who you are.
Again, it's not gonna. Yeah, exactly. It's not going anywhere. I think our personalities are relatively fixed, at this point especially. Well, thank you, Ray, for joining me. Love all your insights. I mean, what I take away from this conversation is that we don't just travel to see the world, we travel to better understand it and to understand ourselves. Whether it's a walk in the woods or a visit to a place steeped in history, we have these beautiful opportunities to get outside of our heads and into the shared story of being human. So, if this episode moved you, share it with someone who might need the reminder, and stay curious, stay open, and as Ray says, go see and do it. And remember, it'll work out. It works out. Thanks a lot, Ray. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, brother.